Hello. Thanks for joining. This is ICRC-TV's COVID-19 HR and business updates. And to be truthful, I think this is like our 5th or 6th show. And I want to thank all of you for just showing up with this on Tuesdays. And for those of you who watch the shows during the week, we really appreciate it. We're getting some great feedback. My name is Pandy Pridemore, Principal Consultant with the Human Resource USA. And I am having an absolute blast doing this show. I have been able to recruit some very interesting people for today's show, as well as some that are going to be coming out next week to continue our topic. Because as this whole process, this whole incident, event, I don't know how everybody's even describing what we're doing right now with this COVID-19, but as it progresses, your concerns are evolving with it. Your questions are developing, I should say. You're thinking things through. You're starting to apply what little bit you've got and what you need for each of your businesses. And the people that we have on this show want to help you even more. So today we're going to talk about, all right, they say we can start thinking about phasing in, bringing people back into the fold, getting our doors reopened. But from a management perspective, what does that look like? And you know where I am, I'm always thinking about the people side. I'm always thinking about, well, how do we get our team back? How do we, put all the pieces together? But at the same time, none of us can ignore the fact that finance is going to be driving a lot of this, whether it be the money coming in from all the different loans and grants, or maybe the money that we've already had in the tills. How are we going to phase in and still keep the electric on and payroll in and everybody satisfied, also taking care of our customers and clients at the same time. So today's show is about how should we be setting our priorities? What should we be thinking about? And my first guest is one of my most favorite people in the entire world. This gentleman and I have, we've been kind of talking. He's been coaching me, mentoring me for years. I am very excited to introduce Scott Warwick.
Hey, how you doing?
Yay!
All right. Don't expect too much.
Well, let me finish with my introduction. This is big. Scott's an attorney with Scott Warwick Employment Law Services. He is an absolute expert in the field of human resources, and also has Scott Warwick Human Resource Coaching, Consulting and Training Services. So when I think about, bringing somebody on to help HR people, put their priorities in place and help them get their things in line, I couldn't help but pick up the phone and say, hey, Scott, do me a favor. So welcome, Scott.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. I'm looking forward to this. And actually, when things like this happen, I just happen to be lucky. I happen to do something for a living that can help. And I like that.
And a lot of other people like it too.
Yeah.
So when we think about, and again, your clients are all over the country. So this isn't just something that's occurring in Ohio for you.
Oh, no, not at all. In just about every different industry. So when we're looking at what we need to do, I've got a lot of manufacturing clients. I've got labs, think tanks. I even have clients who sire animals. So just Google that and you'll get a real good idea as to, OSHA, things like this. So it's all across the board. But, that's the one thing. We're in a pandemic, the whole world. Yeah. In my lifetime, the last real pandemic we had was the Spanish flu, 2018 or 1918 to 1920. So I wasn't around. The whole world. I've got clients in Australia.
Oh, wow. No, yeah. I didn't know that.
In England. And so common sense sometimes doesn't prevail. And I just did a session this morning, just to let you know, I'm posting so much stuff and I'm spending my whole days producing podcasts and writing and researching. Oh my God, the CARES Act alone was 900 pages. Oh, it's like a 900-page kidney stone. Oh my God, it was horrible. And then everything we've been getting on the Families First Act has been piece by piece by piece by piece. And we just got the final regs, which the questions and answers and the information we were getting from the Department of Labor doesn't match the final regs. So there's differences. And so I'm telling my clients, don't go to that question and answer page for Department of Labor anymore, because you got to look at the regs. And so I'll tell you, one thing, I'm an old HR guy for about 40 years. I've been practicing employment labor law for 25, but I will tell you, this all boils down to humans. And I don't care what part of the world you're in, all humans are basically wired the same, and they're afraid. They're afraid for their health, they're afraid for their families, and financial. This is, I'll tell you, take this stuff seriously. You got to know the Families First Act. You got to know the CARES Act. You got to know the PPP cold, because if your employees get the feeling like you don't care about them, you've destroyed the trust. And that means, is it safe? Is it safe to work?
Let's play off of that, Scott, because that's one of the questions that came in. A gentleman wants to reopen his doors. It's a manufacturing setting, and yet, even though he's been an essential worker, the workers are now saying, look, we think we've been exposed to too much. We don't want any more coming in. We want to just self-quarantine.
Yeah.
And, how does an employer, from your perspective, how does an employer address the fear? Because we've talked about on this show a number of times, fear does not fall under the FFCRA programs. They don't get paid to go home because they're afraid.
Right.
What should an HR person be doing right now?
Great. And that's what I did a webinar this morning, and I'm going to re-record it into a podcast, and I'm going to post it on my website. And again, that's where I'm posting things, scottwarwick.com. It's all free, all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to post OSHA's recommendations going forward, because everybody thinks of the law and it's like, oh, what's our liability? Well, honestly, it's not your liability. I mean, lawyers have brainwashed us into thinking, oh, the worst thing is going to happen, you're going to get sued. No, you're going to die. I mean, that's worse, or you're going to go out of business. And so what do we know? We know that this is a germ, but this is stuff we should have been doing for the last 20 years anyway. I mean, really, it's just like the one thing that you should really realize how disgusting humans are. Oh my God, that's why this stuff is everywhere. Just give you an example. Years ago, I got yelled at for going to the gym, and I was squirting the chairs and everything with half alcohol, half water. And they said, oh no, you can't do that. Well, then up yours, okay, because I've swabbed. I tell you really want to freak somebody out, go swab them, okay? Swab an airline, okay? Because you take that on there, you just put it in a petri dish. Oh my God, I'm just wondering, how do you get these body fluids on the machine? I mean, what have you been doing? COVID is transferred by saliva, by the moisture out of your mouth, but also feces. Okay, what do we know? So how is it coming back to work? You have liability, legal liability, which is the least of your worries, if you don't take reasonable measures, and that's under the general duty clause. Okay, but you've also got premises liability. All right, if you continue to live the way you lived for the last 100 years, you're going to get in trouble. I wouldn't work for you myself, because first and foremost, don't think your people know how to wash their hands. Do not think that for a minute. And I'm going to post on my website some images of somebody, a woman's hands, that she washed her hands for 6 seconds with soap. And then they imaged her hands after 30 seconds with soap. The difference is night and day, just night and day. You touch things with your hands, the doorknobs, the elevator buttons, and they're disgusting. They are full of germs. So I'm going to put out a list from the CDC, which is exactly what OSHA is going to rely upon. They've already said, we're going to rely on what they're telling us. You train your people. Okay. If I come into your work site, I want to see tissues everywhere. And I don't want people to be blowing their nose or something like this and throwing the tissues on their desk with them in the trash can. I want to see wipes. I want to see sprays and paper towels everywhere throughout the day. I want you to be cleaning the doorknobs, cleaning everything just throughout the day. We're lucky if somebody cleans the doorknobs once a year. So you see, we got to start thinking about different things. PPE. Is it necessary to have masks in your workplace and gloves? Well, you see, all these different types of businesses, you're going to have to make that decision. And I tell you, here's the big one. And I've actually got clients that, and I'm going to put out the list of COVID symptoms. I got a client right now that if you not running a temperature, you come to work. Okay. Well, the temperature is 100.4. Okay. You don't necessarily have a fever. And this came up with one of my clients where everybody's testing fine with their fevers, no fevers, but you got one guy over here going on coughing jags. Dry cough is a symptom. Chest pains is a symptom. Headaches is a symptom. Muscle aches are a symptom. And this one just really gets me from the CDC. Blue lips. I mean,
Oh, no.
common sense, people. If I sit next to somebody and they're turning blue, all the squad. I mean, they're dying. That's what that means. You're dying. Your tissue is dying. That's what it means. So no, I want to educate my people. And I got one client that says, if you come to work and you're on coughing jags, and if we test you and test your temperature and you're 101, you're fired. You are fired. You do not come to work. Now you see the change in American work ethic.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. And now that's perfectly legal. I'm not advising that, but I'm telling you, stay home. If you're sick, keep your cootie ranch at home. Don't bring it here. Because that's the thing is when I see people, it's a whole different way of thinking. When I see people wearing the masks, I'm not really protecting me. I'm protecting you. Okay. This is the exact same thing that we had, if you're old enough like me to remember, AIDS when it first came out. It changed the medical industry. Now you glove up. You treat everybody like they have some bloodborne pathogen of some kind. You assume everybody around you has the flu, the cold, COVID. And I can tell you right now, these are habits that we should have been doing anyway. And I'll tell you, swab I don't want to get sick. I'll tell you, you should be swabbing your elevator buttons. You should be swabbing your handrails to see how well your people are doing. Because remember, it transfers through spit and feces.
I've got a client with a manufacturing firm that make boxes, but he instantly doubled the amount of time housekeeping and people were in the building. I mean, and literally I said, well, if you're doing that, then make sure they're very visible so that the employees have that unconscious assurance that you're doing the extra effort. They can see what he's cleaning. They can see how long he's in the building cleaning.
Yeah.
And again, to your point, he said, I don't really know why I wasn't doing this anyways. I mean, the cleaning guy's even out there wiping down the presses. So again, good advice for HR people right now in their settings. They need to be really looking at not only the cleaning aspect, but they need to be walking the floor, determining whether they can actually offer that social distancing. I've got cubicle edges that literally there's no 6 feet between one person and the other. And they may have to do some actual reformatting of the floor and where people are sitting.
Maybe that's a good case for the mask.
Yep, there you go.
I mean, if you're in a law firm, piece of cake. If you're in an accounting firm, piece of cake. If you're working on a meat packing plant, and I'll tell you, this whole thing and the way I was raised, I mean, 20 years ago, is as long as you can breathe, you go to work, because that's what you do. No, because you're spreading this stuff now. We got to think differently. And if you're going to work in close proximity to somebody, then it's not just an FDA type of thing. Now, maybe you are wearing the mask because you're within breathing space. And let's not forget, it's not just COVID. My little brother at the age of 53 died of the flu. So we think of the flu, it's like, it's just the flu. These are germs, viruses and bacteria. They will kill you.
Let's go back to, again, you said the regs are beyond the Q&A that everyone's been relying on, but the regs did not change from the perspective that you still have to have a COVID-19 reason for participating in either the paid sick leave or the extended FMLA.
That's true.
So these employers that are getting their PPP money and they're sending out these new schedules saying, okay, guys, it's all time to come back. One of the questions was, hey, I've got 2 employees who instantly responded back and said, yeah, I'm not ready to come back yet. I kind of like the time off. So could I come back in part-time versus full-time, when in fact, they have full-time hours that need to be filled.
Yes.
Any advice for those individuals? I know what I told them, but
I know what you told them, and that's exactly what I would tell them. I'm like, that's not exactly the work ethic we're looking for. And understand too, some of this, I've had people call up and say, I know I was at my sister's house the other day, and I know that her coworker was sick. I don't want to come to work now.
That was the next question. Thank you.
Oh, no, that's not. The bottom line is, and here's one thing to think about. I think Ohio is pretty average in there, in that our extra $600 a week under the CARES Act,
Mhm.
you ain't gonna start till mid-May. I just talked to somebody yesterday, and they just got the paperwork. I mean, like, just now. So it's going to take a while. So if you've got somebody at home, it's not like they're sitting back enjoying that extra $600 a week plus half their wages. What's happening is, I just want to stay home. Look, this is like good old-fashioned unemployment law. You're being recalled. I don't want to come back. Then you have a problem. Okay. Now, if you're COVID positive or symptoms or something, another story. And we got to be careful here a little bit, because here's a secret: don't tell anybody. People lie. They lie. Okay, so it really would be easy to get more time off by just calling your doctor up and coughing a little bit or something. But the bottom line is, it would really be nice to have the whole summer off at half your wages. That would be swell. I'm sorry, I'm recalling you. We got this federal money, okay? And finally smack the fingers of the big companies to keep their fingers out of it, so the small employers, which is where most Americans work anyway, can get this help to get back to work. And I just don't have a lot of sympathy for this, because I see people, whether you agree with the protests or not, people are protesting to get back to work. Exactly.
I'm trying to figure out where they are in relationship to some of my clients, because I'm thinking these guys are protesting to get out of work.
Yeah. Downtown Columbus, that's where they are. So, yeah.
Let's touch a little bit about what HR people should be thinking about right now, Scott, as they're coaching their business owners or the company leadership in regards to how to bring back and who to bring back first, because I'm a little concerned about some of my groups deciding that this is the perfect time to kind of weed out the dead wood, and they're kind of realizing, oh gosh, why did I wait so long? This guy's performance has never been this good, so this is the perfect time to exit him out. And I'm just you know what I'm thinking.
Oh yeah.
So beyond the discrimination points, what else should they be thinking about in terms of how to coach their business owners on how to bring people back?
Well, the easy answer is always by seniority. That's the easy answer. It is a class of people, and we do that all the time anyway. You give somebody more vacation time or sick time based on their seniority, things like this. I'm not a big fan of that myself, but it is the easiest way to do it from a legal perspective and just a quote fairness. But I would ask my employer, okay, if you recall people by seniority, like seniority by job or duties or something like this, is that going to work for you? Are these really your best people? And if I hear yes, it's okay, then it's like, okay, go ahead, because that's the easiest way to do it. But I will tell you, I want to have a system in place where I reward my best people best. Now, I'll tell you, if you have not been documenting that, it's too late. All right. So I've got clients right now that if anybody had received a written warning, guess what? You're last to be recalled. Okay. So you see, there's something in place. And it's funny, I was doing a webinar with the EEOC and we were talking about this. And I said, because the EEOC suspended right to sue letters. Okay. So the whole world's in sort of mess right now. It just truly is. Like,
I'm waiting for somebody to wake me up.
Oh yeah. But the thing is if you've got somebody who's always been a problem, don't use this as an example to stick it to them, because everybody's got a protected class. Either if you don't have a different, maybe skin color, religion, anybody over the age of 40 limps. Okay, they got some diabetes, they got something. So no, you address the problem. And I'll tell you right now, this is the big thing that I talk to supervisors and companies about. if you cannot sit down and address and resolve conflict, get out of management.
We've talked about that.
Oh, that's why you're there. And if I got a manager that say I'm running a company or I'm consulting with a company, and I hear somebody like a manager or supervisor say, oh yeah, but this person isn't very good, then I'm going to go, why are they here? Why isn't there something in their file? Because think about it. You're going to now stick it to them. You never said anything. The reason you didn't say anything is because you are a passive aggressive.
That has nothing to do with COVID-19.
Well, don't use COVID-19 to use an example to stick it to somebody that you don't have any documentation on. So
exactly.
First and foremost, if you can use seniority, great. If not, you got to find some kind of non-protected class criteria to call these people back. And if you have not been preparing for that, then yeah, you're going to have to go by seniority, and you're just going to have to then deal with the performance issues later, which you should have been anyway.
Well, and I've got one client that lost a great deal of his business. I mean, it's one of those that you project 9 months out for producing product and getting it. And now this pocket of time, believe it or not, has shut down sales. So he literally looked at me and said, can I just bring back these departments here that I know can be actively working? And then slowly, as the need arises based on the needs of the business, I can bring those people in because I know that they'll have work to do. And I absolutely, I mean, that's again, something we can justify.
Absolutely, because I've got clients like this, because more and more companies are, sort of diversifying and things like this. And so, oh yeah, I think that's going to be exactly what happens is certain departments are going to come back first and other departments aren't going to come back till later because of need.
Yeah. And the bigger issue here for all of this is, again, going back to what can the company afford, whether the sales are not coming in, what can the sales support, whether they've got the PPP money, whether they got the other additional loans. It all comes down to finance. And that kind of is a great way to caveat into our next guest. Another gentleman that I have enjoyed spending some time with, but don't know quite as well as Scott. So I'm really feeling very fortunate that he's willing to join us today. Tom Paquette, a partner with TP4 here in Cincinnati and president of TPAC. Tom is a financial guru who has a very broad experience working with small, medium-sized companies and focuses on business operations. So I truly felt that he was the perfect individual to bring in right now, because I know that we've actually had a chance to maybe even share a couple clients. So Tom, welcome.
Thank you, Pandy. I appreciate it very much.
No, this is fun. And I hope if you've been watching Scott and I, you can kind of get a feel for where some of this is going, because HR people don't always agree with finance people. You tend to slow us down.
I've never seen that before.
I'm just coming out there and saying it, but this is what Scott and I are hearing, is that people are getting some of the PPP money. I want to say PQ. But I had a client ask today, she said, I have not heard about my loan yet. Is there any way that I can get a confirmation that I'm at least still in the running? What do we tell people like that?
What I've been telling people is one of the most important things you can do. This is where the banking relationship really makes a difference. What I've found is the people that have, at least a good, decent relationship talking to their banker, what I found is they know where they stand. The ones that don't, if you're in, the internet and just, doing it, not that that's bad, but what I found is they are really struggling to get information, because even their bankers, in a lot of cases, they said they're going up different tracks and don't know. But the people that have the relationships are the ones that are really finding out. Some have even started to go to community banks just to, even though they have one, because they don't know where they stand. On the internet.
It's scary because now everybody's hearing that the money's has run out.
Yep.
And so they just want to know, is my money kind of set aside? Am I just in the paper process of it?
That's right. That's right. And, and like I said, that a lot of times they can't get a straight answer, yes, no, or indifferent from the bank. Even no would be okay if they would just tell them.
Absolutely.
That. And
No,
that's been hard
everybody
to
just
get.
needs to upfront. Everybody knows things are going to change. Change is the only constant in the universe. So we all know that's
But
going to happen.
that's one of the learnings I really am giving people. Make sure you know your banker, going forward, because this has been a case where everybody that knows their banker, I know out of my client base, they know where they stand, and in most cases have got funded.
Good. But a lot of companies don't have a CFO who maintains and massages that relationship. And most business owners that the three of us work with are so busy that they're going to a banker only if they absolutely need to. So let's talk about, Tom, guide us and guide our viewers on what should the individual with the CFO responsibility, or maybe the controller, what should they be focusing on right now? Now that the loans have been, the paperwork's been done, what should they be focusing on now to help the business owners move forward?
And quite frankly, this is the busiest in my 30-year career, the busiest 6 weeks I think I've ever had. And I'm finding the same things are what my client base is asking my team and I to look at. The big thing is looking at they're reforecasting their budgets, because in a lot of cases, sales have just been blown out of the water. And of course, the expenses with that. So almost all of my clients are reforecasting, the budgets. They had, many of them had record first quarters, and, the second quarter, has gotten started and there's nothing. So they're reforecasting their budgets and trying to get their arms around what they have. Many have had to furlough or lay off a lot of their employees, and that's been causing a problem for them as well. So they're just getting in touch with where are my expenses, what do I think my revenues are going to be. A lot of clients, a lot of my customers, they can't get into their customers' buildings to even see them to find out where they are. So that's been a scramble to understand where our spending is. The second big thing that I'm really focusing on is cash is king. So having a good understanding of where your cash is. And one of the big things is receivables. So what I've been letting my clients know, make sure, because a lot of clients are closed down, or I have one client that's been very industrious on how he's been able to get a hold of accounts payable departments. He's been able to leave messages, and he said, quite frankly, that's been effective because the payables people are at home, and he said that he's gotten callbacks from people that he never got callbacks before from payables department, but at least they're calling him back. But really have a control over where your receivables are. That's another thing. And the third thing is just documenting where your PPP funds are going to go. If you've applied for a loan and you anticipate getting one or already have one, the misnomer is talk to a lot of clients about this is, you have to spend at least 75% of those PPP funds on your payroll and, related things. And a lot of, clients are saying, well, I could make some dips into paying vendors and things like that. You have to be really careful on how that money is spent, because even though the money is cheap, if it does not turn from a loan to a grant, the payback is so fast, 18 months to 2 years, that you could get into trouble with the SBA and the bank quickly if you don't have a good handle. Those are the big things that I'm really cautioning my clients to work on as they move forward.
Well, and I love that you brought the use of the PPP money up, because we had two questions on that one. One individual asked, is he permitted to take some of the funds from the PPP and extend it as bonuses for the team that stayed solid, the core group that has been weathering it through on site? The executive director came back and said, I really want to use some money to reward them. Now, it wasn't in the projection that, I guess, the paperwork that they had submitted to the bank. So this is kind of an add-on expense, but he wants to run it through payroll, obviously. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Because that's running through payroll. It's payroll, dollars being spent. I think that would pass the muster of what the bank and the SBA will be looking for for changing that from a loan to a grant. I don't see a problem with that at all.
Wonderful. Another individual said, she had gotten hers in and she said, Pandy, I kind of panicked. So I put that money into another account and I got a hold of my payroll company and told them to start pulling payroll from that new account that I opened up. She said, can you see any real problems now that I've opened up a brand new bank account? Tom?
I don't see a problem with that at all, because that's where the PPP money is in that account. Is that what we're?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the only money that's in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main purpose of the PPP funding, and what the Congress and the SBA intended for that money. So if that's what it's being used for, that's a perfect way to use it. And like I said, I've developed a spreadsheet for clients just so they can keep track of documenting how it's being spent during that 8-week period once you get the funds, just so it's almost like they can know, are we at 75%, or maybe, since you have to spend at least 75% on that, just to have a idea where we are. We don't want to wait till the last week and say, oh shoot, I don't have a chance to make my make where I need to be. It's a good measuring stick to stay on target.
Yeah. A question I got today was, there's individuals that once they come back, I still have to continue addressing their performance, and there's a really good chance I'm going to have to let them go. Will I get binged for that if I go ahead and terminate them outside of the COVID? And, my understanding was they're okay as long as they're replacing that position and it's an even exchange. But am I missing something, Tom? Did I forget something?
I think you hit it right on the head, Pandy. That's as long as they're, replacing that head, if they take one out, put one in,
yeah,
that's critical. And as long as they're doing that, they're not looking necessarily at who the individuals are, but just the numbers and then the payroll dollars that they line up.
Let me just ask, tracking is a big deal here, isn't it?
No question. That's one of the biggest issues that I see. And like I said, I develop, a tool for all my clients. Just we got to know where we are, each week. So, we don't get into trouble down the road, because it's pretty onerous. Even though the interest rate's 1%, doesn't sound bad. But if you borrow a couple $100,000 and have to pay that back in 18 months, that can easily put a company into, financial trouble, just with the short payback window. So it's very dangerous to do that. And that's why it's good to be checking on how that money's being spent.
And a lot of small businesses, I know Pandy and I know a lot of sole practitioners. Okay. And then small business, and I'm talking 5, 6, 8, 10 employees. I'll tell you, this is something they got to take seriously, that tracking of the money, tracking of the people, because the whole idea is to bring these people back. And the whole idea is to use the vast majority of this money for payroll. If they're not set up for this, or they don't have that tool, 18 months, 2 years down the road, they could be in big trouble, couldn't
they? It could be in real big trouble, and it could be worse than, where they are now. So that's been one of my cautions on for folks to understand where that, where are you spending your money, and using that, some kind of tool to be measuring, where is that money being spent, because you're going to have to account for it one way or the other.
And we've talked on previous shows about the importance of having a sophisticated processor for payroll because of the need for those reports and being able to pull information instantaneously. But, it just dawned on me, what we haven't talked about is, what about the loss of a key individual in your company that may be making decisions or making planning actions around this money or around these programs, and then they leave in 18 months or they leave in a year from now. If you don't have the proper documentation, or you're not using a program that everyone's privy to or that everyone's agreed on, you could be in a world of hurt just because this one person leaves and they were controlling all of it in their head or on a piece of paper in a notebook somewhere.
And I see that a lot when I go into, clients, is so often it's in somebody's head, and trying to figure it out, it's like putting a puzzle together, which, it is. So that happens a lot more than you would want it to happen, but that's very common.
Oh my gosh. Let's caveat a little bit over to one of the programs I got within the CARES Act. I had a question come through from Jennifer, who, bless her heart, I was schooled on this one. She sent me a question and said, hey, talk to me about Section 2206 in the CARES Act that relates to the employer's ability to pay student loans. Now, I had to go digging through to find it. And so what we're asking, Tom, is, and if you don't, if you need to investigate it too as well, please, but let me know. But are we talking about student loans that your employees have incurred prior to or maybe during employment for their own education and their own careers? Or are we talking about tuition reimbursement programs of the employers?
I'd have to look and see, because that's getting, pretty deep into it. Almost everything I see with the CARES Act, it uses February 15th kind of as a date. So for loans, for any kind of things before that, if they're in effect, that can be used as a piece of reimbursement. For student loans specifically, I'd have to look at that a little deeper to know the answer to that question.
Yeah, and this is, again, it's a valid question. It was one of her clients who wants to take some of those funds from the PPP and use it to pay this individual's student loan, even though, I guess there's a clause in the CARES Act too that freezes student loan payments. So
Yes.
It's not even a major issue, but she thought maybe she could help try to pay the interest for this individual and run it through payroll if she could. Let's kind of, since that's a tough one, we're gonna have to research that one and we'll come back on it. Let's talk about rehires. Scott, in the CARES Act, there's a little bit of confusion around individuals that are being rehired. And the way I interpreted that, and I need your clarification, was that these are rehires from being laid off or furloughed or something involved with COVID-19. These aren't individuals that were employed with us over a year ago, correct?
Oh, that when we're talking, and that's one good thing to keep in mind. And it does get confusing. It truly does. But when we're talking about CARES Act or Families First, we're talking COVID.
Okay.
So here's like a special set of rules. And here's how I've sort of been describing it. You still got ADA, you still got unemployment, you still got FMLA. And honestly, it's really sad. I just updated my learning systems on those because I'm hearing a lot of stuff which is basic FMLA stuff or ADA stuff. So think of the Hilton. Okay, so the Hilton, you got the Hilton, and that's the ADA, FMLA, and everything. On one side, you got Starbucks. They went in and set up. That's like the Families First Act. It's its own little thing, but it's also part of this bigger structure. That bigger structure is still there. And right across the aisle is a Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, well, that's the CARES Act. Okay, so I think a good way of thinking of these two new, major pieces of legislation, they are really moving into the federal structure along with everything else. So, but understand, the CARES Act and the Families First Act, they are dealing only really with the COVID crisis. So if you really, really need a Starbucks, that's where you go. If you really need a Dunkin' Donut, that's where you go. But those other laws are still in place. So if you laid off somebody in December, and which I had a lot of clients do because they're off during the winter or something like this, like as if we still had a winter. But so they're coming up for recall, but now these other people have been laid off or furloughed or whatever because of what's happening now. Well, it's those people who are laid off in December are still laid off. And the people who were furloughed or laid off in March and certainly in April, well, they're still laid off. So you would want to look and see, okay, what is the proper callback? And I think this goes back to what you brought up, because it's not business as usual.
Right.
It very likely could be that one division is called back. It's like, well, yeah, but you should call these people back over here. But that business is not coming back till July. This business is coming back now. So all new playbook. But that's why I keep stressing, you got to know CARES Act, you got to know Families First. And my big assumption is you already know these other laws. Okay, so, I'll tell you, Most of my time is spent putting these podcasts and materials together and just talking to people on the phone. And honestly, that's why I'm posting so much stuff out there for free on my website. And I tell you, I've probably added 300 or 400 people, just to let you know how much need there is. If somebody wants my updates, they just shoot me an email, get all that through my website. I probably added 300 or 400 people in the last 2 weeks to get these updates. Yeah. I usually get 12 to 15,000 hits a month on my website. This month we'll hit 200,000.
Tom, how would you like 200,000 hits on your website?
I love it.
I had to buy more bandwidth, by the way. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's okay. That's okay.
Well, and there's so much buried in the CARES Act. Have you run across, Tom, any things that employers are not taking advantage of, or things just like the student loan thing? Is there anything there that individuals should be looking into, that they should be partnering with their CPA or their financial advisors or bankers?
A lot of it, Pandy, is it's just been getting the basics down. One of the things, the first couple of weeks of this, the SBA, several times has changed, their interpretation of the CARES Act. So, we've been just trying to figure out, okay, here's where this is. Of course, now, if they come back again with another round of funding, are the rules going to stay the same there? Part of it is just, do we have the right foundation set with the right rules right now where we are? The other one is just, do we have the right blocking and tackling? Haven't even gone that deep, because I just want to make sure people are putting their expenses, that they're anticipating using the funds for into the right bucket, so we can figure out, do we have enough? And then we haven't even dug very deep on, like you said before, like on things like student loans, which are, great items to know but we need to know those things. But we've been just trying to get the basics and get the foundation built.
Yeah, I was reading through, and again, I'll just go ahead and show it. I've got things flagged, I've got things pulled, and the question is, is there going to be even money for workforce retraining? And of course there is, but how is that going to be administered? And so getting back to how can we help these business owners and this leadership today prepare for tomorrow? What do you think is probably the most obvious thing that they need to be checking on? Because you brought up some very good points, Tom. They need to be checking their cash flow. They need to be making sure that they're trying some new ways of getting money in. In fact, I want to throw this out. I actually put on my invoices this past month, ACH is much appreciated. And here, don't forget, I take credit cards. And I was rather impressed that I got like 3 payments in within 2 days, just because people realized, at least I'm assuming they just realized, oh gosh, I don't have to go in and get a signature on a check. I don't have to, maybe go an extra point. So I had to actually think out of the box myself, because I tend to let people go for a while. So I'm glad that you brought that up. The other thing that I really want to stress too is what documentation. Now think again at everything that we've been talking about, because over the last few shows, we've been emphasizing that documentation is absolutely of the essence during this time. But getting back to how important the documentation is for finance, what reports or what kind of details do you think that they absolutely, top three that they absolutely have to be watching?
Well, I would say for the next 8 weeks, for sure, you got to have your payroll journals. And I know sometimes you have to have them at your fingertips, because what's going to happen is you're going to have to be able to prove, how you spent the proceeds of, the PPP loan. So that's, from a documentation standpoint, you got to have your payroll journals. You got to have your quarterly, 941 federal payroll tax report ready at the end of June. Just, they usually they might be somewhere off on the desk somewhere, or in the computer somewhere, but they got to be really close to you now. And you almost have, you do have to know what they are. to really get your arms around it. The other thing you're going to really need to do is keep the other bills, so that'll cover 75%, but, so you've got to keep your 401k statements, and you got to keep your medical insurance for the next couple months. All those bills got to be right at your fingertips to be able to show the bank and the SBA when you're done. And then finally, you have to, if you're paying interest on, any kind of, loans that you haven't deferred those kinds of things, so you need statements for, those. They need to be, again, at your fingertips. So when you're ready to report, because it's the way I'm reading the CARES Act is it's up to you as the borrower to make sure you get the proper documentation to the bank and to the SBA so they can make it forgivable for you. So you really got to stay on top of this paperwork.
That just reminds me again how important it is that business owners have the passwords and have access into these bank accounts and into these checking accounts.
The payroll report, get into the payroll. You wouldn't believe all the phone calls and emails I've had. I just had an email from a business owner last night. He was on with his payroll provider for over an hour, and I had if you have I have your user ID and password, I'll go get it. And I had the reports to him in 5 minutes, but because I had access to him. But I know that's common. The guy's just running his business. He doesn't have time to remember where all that is, but you got to have it for, it's going to be critical.
Well, and in many cases, Scott and I can tell you, they've got people making $20 an hour running that payroll or running, those checks. And if she's been there for 15 or 20 years, she thinks she owns the company, or and they're hiding information. They're keeping it. So this is not the time to allow that to continue. We mentioned in the last show, I had told one of my clients, you go get a filing cabinet and COVID, everything goes there. I really do not recommend that it go into personnel files. I don't recommend that you keep these payroll records, with all the others, because what we haven't talked about, Tom, is the importance of maintaining all this documentation for the tax credits on the FCCRA.
Right.
The documentation is required on that, just as important.
No question. I mean, and that we haven't even gotten to that part. We're just trying to get through the PPP, but that's going to be critical as well. Time to calculate the tax credits.
I've been telling my clients exactly, and Tom, you can speak to this better than I can, but I'm telling them, look, anything you're paying out under the Families First Act, have a separate line item for that. I mean, if nothing else right away, I mean, I've heard some payroll company, now isn't this a good time to figure out that you got a good payroll company, because some of them, they're getting the tax credits as soon as they're submitting them. Other ones just don't know what to do with it. And Pandy, this is a good time to make sure that you don't have somebody holding you for ransom. How many times have you been to this where, oh yeah, I had somebody in a warehouse once that changed all the warehouse codes because if you fired her, you wouldn't know where anything is. Well, you should never let that happen, because what if she gets hit by a bus, or what if you run over her with a bus? You've got to be able to get that stuff. And Tom, that's what I'm thinking about here. And honestly, the finance stuff I just hate, but I'll tell you, I've seen so many people. Isn't it just good general accounting principles that whoever's running your payroll and finance and everything, they should be taking a couple of weeks off every year just to make sure they're not embezzling.
That's right. And like I said earlier, is I've gone into occasions more than once where, the controller CFO had it all in his head, and he gave his 2-week notice, or she gave 2-week notice, and we had to redo it all from scratch. And it's painful, very, very painful.
Yeah, gentlemen, this has been such a great conversation, and I really, really appreciate this. And I want you to stay on just for a little bit more, because again, we have tried really hard on this show to emphasize certain things that you need to be doing on a regular basis during this time period and moving forward, because these are good practices. But let's go over this. One of them is documentation. Documentation is so vital for all of everything that's going on, but Scott's reiterated the importance of documenting performance, documenting policies, which we didn't go over, which we need to, documenting when things are occurring and how things are occurring. And I know that we can get too much documentation, and then when get into events like this, we don't have enough. So documentation is absolutely vital. But did you hear them say over and over again the need for communication? Communication with people that you surround yourself who help you be better. We've talked about it. You need to be working with you and talking with your banker. You need to be talking with your employee benefit broker. You need to be talking to your labor law attorney or your consultant. You need to be talking with your payroll company. You need to surround yourself with the best minds possible, and don't try to go through any of this alone. This is not anything that any of us should be doing alone. That's why we have the wonderful privilege of offering this show and bringing on these experts to make each one of you feel like you have somebody you can contact. Checklists, documents, podcasts, you've been offered a tremendous amount of resources, and right now you need to be very selective as business owners in what resources you're using, because again, as Scott just mentioned, the documents themselves, the regs themselves, the criteria, as Tom said, for these loans and the different ways they're administering them, they're changing. So get yourself associated with a really good professional. Tom, I know that you won't shy away if anyone reaches out to you over at TP4 or TPAC. And Scott, thank you so much for offering the resources that you did on your website.
My pleasure.
Next week, I think we really need to continue this conversation on putting the building blocks and the foundation on moving forward and opening our doors and making the right decisions now so that we're not caught behind the 8 ball next week. So with that said, Scott, I know you're willing to come back and spend some more time with us so that we can talk about what policies we need to be drawing up now moving forward, maybe even some new documents.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. And then Tracy Rawberg from the circuit is going to be joining us again, talking about her checklist with IT and all the things we need to be thinking about in terms of security. If we are going to leave remote workers out, what do we need to be putting into place to make sure that they're not only productive, but that we're protecting the company? And if you have any questions or any guidance for us, please keep those questions coming through, because this is how we can help you and address the things that are, again, what do we say, relevant, but to keep you engaged in solutions for your company. Scott Warwick, Tom Paquette, thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Pandy Pridemore, principal engineer, well, there's a new one. Principal consultant with the Human Resource USA. And we want to thank you for joining us.
Take care.